go ahead and kick off this podcast today. We have a pianist, composer, and keyboardist who specializes in orchestral arrangements and music for media. You might know him as a keyboard virtuoso in the symphonic death metal band Fleshgod Apocalypse. Please welcome Francesco Ferrini. What's up, man? Thanks for coming on.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me, and it's a real pleasure for me to be here today.
Awesome, man. Yeah, like I've been following you and Fleshgod for a long time. You guys have been one of my favorite bands, and I've always been blown away just by the amount of attention to detail with the orchestral stuff and combining it with death metal. I think that I was telling Nathan earlier, I was like, when I discovered you guys on, I think it was MySpace. I don't know. I don't think you were officially in the band. Did you just do the intro piano for Embodied Deception?
Basically, when I was the ghost member of the band at the time, because I was involved actually at an early stage when Francesco Paoli started the band. He wanted me to write some orchestral interludes that you can hear, the ones that you can hear in Oracles, our first album. And most important, he wanted to point, let's say, the attention towards the classical elements in the music. So, the music was really brutal for probably most people, and it still is. It's, technical death metal, heavily influenced by classical music, Baroque music, even romantic or post-romantic music. So at the time, he really wanted me to be involved, to put more attention on the classical element that was within the band through nature in the end. So it's not just on the phrasing, not just on on the riffs or solos. He wanted the title track for the first album, and this is something that basically it has become a trademark for us, having for each album a title track for the album, which is not a proper song involving the whole band, not a metal song, but a piano piece, a piano track. So in his vision, it's like having the essence of the whole album and the band itself incarnated into something which is completely the opposite of the main musical proposal of the band. So he wanted me to do something which sounded, which was inspired especially by romantic piano pieces. So I started, sketching. He liked what I did, and that ended up being Oracles. And for the intro of Embodied Deception that you mentioned, he just wanted something as extreme as the music was, and he wanted something like a pure virtuoso, like crazy virtuoso piano stuff to start the song, and to have that very strong classical sound from within the very first seconds. That's and again, something that could be in contrast with the music the band provided. So that I basically started like that, just as a session in a way.
Yeah, honestly, that's one of my favorite intros, because that, like you said, it's very virtuosic and shreddy.
It's basically unplayable. I mean, I really need to practice. I recorded a while back. I recorded a video for it. Of me performing it, because during the years I've had many requests in that regard, because people wanted me to show it because it sounded really crazy, and it is. So I remember I practiced for about 2 weeks, just that. It's a short fragment. It's like 20 seconds. So imagine me being. It requires so much effort to nail it that I think maybe for a very, very for a top-notch classical concert piano player, it might be even, I don't know, maybe, okay, give me the sheet, okay, piece of cake in 5 minutes. But for me, it's different. So I really needed to practice a lot, and with, slowly building it up day after day to kind of to record it, and then to relearn it when I had to record it in front of a camera. So and today I think I wouldn't be able to play it, honestly, not at that speed, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about us being in death metal bands. We just tend to write shit that's way too hard. Like at the time, you're just like, dude, this would be so cool if we did this, and like you map it all out and you know record it, especially when you're working on it all the time. And then like when it comes back to like relearning some stuff, it's just like, what the hell was I thinking? And then especially when it's like years later, because like I feel like our minds tend to change a little bit as the years go on. Like you either start to want to write a little bit more simplistic or a little bit more like thinking about it in like a more chord structure sense than really from a technical perspective. But yeah, sometimes like I go back and I hear stuff and I'm just like, why was I thinking?
That's sometimes if we look back at our earlier stuff, me myself personally, or we as a band, we sometimes were like, oh fuck, why did we do that? Like, for example, why did we keep the snare so loud in the mix? Like if I think about Mafia, it's basically a concert for snare and there's some noise behind being the band performing, and it's louder, much louder than vocals. It's crazy. So
the snare is the vocal of that album. No,
yeah. It's so it's so over the top, but in a way many of our fans, they love that stuff as well. I mean, even if we do very different things, many different things nowadays, we are, I think, more versatile as musicians. We progressed as musicians. I think that me, but everybody in the band, we progressed. We've been progressing and being more mature as we proceeded throughout the years. And we are grown up, let's say, in a way now. We were kids, like we had more. We wanted to basically to rip the world apart back then with Mafia, Agony. Then we started to grow up and being in a way more sophisticated in what we do, and that's what I like. You can tell there's been an evolution, but I think that will never stop for us. I think that you never ever cease to grow up as a musician. If you're curious about music, it's pretty much like you started as a death metal musician and now you're composing for you for Soundiron, so you do your own stuff in a very different way now. I think you're a much different person, a human being and musician than you were.
Yeah, I think it just always stems back to like when I first discovered classical music. I heard Toccata and Fugue in D minor in like a music appreciation class in like 7th grade, and I always had like a propensity for like more darker and kind of moody music because I was listening to like Metallica. Was probably like my first favorite band, and I heard that and it just really stuck and like resonated with me, and I just eventually kind of got more into classical music. And I've always had that kind of. It's funny because I saw the In Sorte Diaboli DVD where Mustis was kind of showing how he put together the orchestrations for that album. And that like blew my mind. Like, what? You can like create that kind of stuff yourself, like with, keyboard. And it sounded really realistic, especially when you listen to some of the early stuff, because Demu was doing stuff like sounded like the soundtrack for Batman 2 mixed with like black metal and like death metal. And I thought that was like the coolest thing. And I've never really heard that. So I always kind of had that like wanting to do like death metal and orchestra. Like that was why I was like, I want to build a home studio so I can kind of like learn how to do that stuff, but I had no idea. So I was just trying to figure it out along the way. And then when I heard that Embodied Deception song, I was like, sons of bitches, they did it. Like that. I was like, that's what I've been kind of wanting to hear. Like, and I mean, of course, like as time has gone on, you guys have incorporated more of the symphonic elements, which I think just really took it to like the next level. It was kind of like I think the next like evolution coming was to really like start infusing that orchestral elements actually with the music. And I think like that's when I was like, all right, now they're just creating some cool shit.
That was part of the plan. At some point, at least, it started being part of the plan, but I simply didn't know it because they didn't tell me. But at some point when they got the first recording deal with Nuclear Blast after their Suffocation tour, because basically what happened is that they played in Los Angeles. Some people from the A&R department of Nuclear Blast America, they were there, and they kind of discovered they really liked what they saw. And they already knew Fleshgod for Mafia and Oracle, so they wanted that to, they gave them a shot, entry-level basic contract, but still a big leap from what they had before. So they started talking with me about adding some symphonic elements within the songs, not just as interludes, not just as intros or piano tracks and such. So I was like, okay, let's do something that they wanted to do something that wouldn't bring this symphonic element to the extreme at first. They wanted to keep their old, trademark sound. They didn't want to scare people away with tons of symphonic elements at first. So we started, adding, working on some progressions together, starting adding some choir lines, some string lines, some piano lines on the actual songs with blended with guitars and everything. But after a few days, Francesco was like, I like this, but we might do something more extreme. We can do something that, in a way, incorporates the style that other bands already experimented, like Demo. You mentioned Demo. I think they're probably the first to fully involve the full symphonic sound, a truly cinematic sound with metal, with real orchestras also.
Yeah.
So he wanted to do something like that, but less, let's say, Elfmanish, or less, let's say, dark, more following the classical mood that was the trademark of the band. So he wanted something more, with a strong classical flavor, more operatic, more triumphant in a way, less dark and scary than, and decadent, less decadent than Demo, or having a completely different mood. Incorporating the energy of the band, the classical elements, the classical phrasing, and the classical harmonies with heavy symphonic layers, and having everything much more chaotic than the traditional, because the standard orchestral / keyboard arrangement that in metal this has been a thing for decades now. But he wanted something more extreme. He wanted something, okay, I want to kind of transmit the energy that comes especially from drums, and from the furious tremolo picks that we have, and the fury of the music onto the orchestra as well. So I want you to go like fully, to go crazy, to go nuts on this. I want you to have like any sort of crazy layering and crazy accents all the time, and really interacting with us all the time. So that ended up being Agony. That was meant to be very different at first. It was like a more, let's say, a catchier, like more commercial in a way. I don't think commercial is a bad word, but if we want to put it,
a little more easily digestible,
easily more mature version of Mafia with some orchestral lines. That was the intent at first. Then it ended up being Agony. So it's a crazy chaos of orchestra and drums, with guitars being most of the time being some kind of a counter line to all of this. So it's vocals, orchestra, and drums, what you hear first. Most of the drum accents and vocal parts, they're kind of crafted around the orchestra and vice versa. So it's we worked a lot on vocals and drums and orchestra together. Then we found ways of incorporating. Sometimes we started from guitars, like you can tell from songs like The Egoism. It's guitar driven. It's like basically the first idea was played on guitar and then orchestrated and then arranged as a to blend with the other songs. But most of the stuff was basically, we started by with I had Francesco humming his idea for the orchestra very often, like for the violation. He was basically like he does very often. He comes out of a shower in the morning, or it's the time of the day when he's most relaxed. So it's under the shower that he has his coolest ideas. Typically, it sounds like a joke, but it's not. He was like the day after, he was like, oh, I have this kind of Mozart ripoff that we can do a song with, and he started singing parabam parabam, like the main fragment, the main motive of the song, at least the first few bars. And then we started sketching on the piano using a string patch, and then the rest is history.
It's funny. It makes me think of, is it the movie Amadeus where like he's like, all right, so the brass are gonna go bum 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 bum. All right, now keep going. All right, now
Yeah,
the strings are gonna be
yeah,
this dun, 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 and like
yeah,
you
yeah.
hear it all like coming together.
It was pretty much like that. He would like, okay, I want like brass to be like pop, 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 like this so I can sing on them,
Hmm.
or I want like have this. I want these accents here on this specific spot so I can accent with drums, and you put like, I don't know, woodwinds or brass or whatever here, or
Hmm.
you know, stuff like that. That he's not a piano player, he's not a keyboardist, but he has
You
some
can hear it.
great intuitions, and he's also classically trained. He studied classical contrabass,
Oh wow.
double bass. I don't know if what's the American term, like double bass, like classical
Yeah,
bass,
yeah.
double bass,
Hmm.
for years in the conservatory.
Oh
So
wow,
he
that's really
started
cool.
as a bass player, so he can even play bass. Yes. So
Wow, I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. So when you guys are arranging music, because like with the early stuff, there was, since there wasn't as much orchestral elements, but the guitars were very like a lot of counterpoint and very, like a lot of
yeah.
musical stuff going on. Do you feel like now, if there are ideas that are more like that on the guitar, do you tend to like take a more of a back seat when it comes to the orchestral arrangement? And then if there's like a full on orchestral piece, like do you ever write orchestral parts first and then have them write guitars to that? Or is it usually if there's a more simple rhythm, then you kind of let the orchestra kind of flow more over it just for like things not clashing or
The process for us has always been very organic because we try to develop the idea from the early stages. Yeah, that might be an idea which is played on guitar, or a riff, for example, or it can be even a piano part that I came out with. But it's always, when we start, it's typically very, very raw.
mm,
uh, I don't know how else I can define that. It turns up really different in the end. It's a very long process because we try to be as simple as possible for on the first idea, and then we try to enrich things as they progress through. So the first idea is always motive, a melody, like for example, the first song after the intro on the album King. It's a brass melody, and we pushed a lot on brass on that part on the first riff, which
mm-hmm,
is some kind of Wagnerian triumphant kind of anthem, and we wanted it to be that way. But the first time I heard that idea, it was from Francesco, and he was playing that on guitar using tremolo pick. So, but he was already imagining it. He imagining that phrase, that specific idea, which changed with time. Of course, we added other like twists and stuff like that.
mm-hmm.
But the very basic idea was written on guitar, but already he was already thinking about the orchestra doubling it. And there are ways to, of course, the way you treat something like that within the orchestra. I mean, it's very typical for us to have choir or brass parts or even string parts, not literally doubling whatever guitars are doing, but outlining the, if you have a tremolo picked part, which is a death metal trademark,
Mm-hmm.
you might have, whole notes or quarter notes or eighth notes within like the shape of the melody, even
Mm-hmm.
if you have like very fast tremolo pick on that. So I basically deconstruct that and assign that to one or more sections. But it's just an example of how organic this process is. It's not just simply, okay, I have a guitar part, a tremolo pick, I put tremolo strings, or I just double, or I just put something completely different on top. It's always a very organic process where, okay, but if you put strings in here, now it sounds shitty because guitars can be, written differently. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you, maybe an idea is very cool on guitar, but when you just double it on strings or choir or whatever it is, it sounds very different and not as effective,
Mm-hmm.
because distorted guitars, for the range, if you, especially if you're playing riff, the range that you're using, the sound that you have, it's distorted, it's nasty. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if you just double it with cellos or violas, it just sounds more cheesy. So you have to figure out ways to incorporate violas or strings in general or whatever it is into that riff without, getting too much away from it, but finding ways to carve everything around it with,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe adding even more value to it without changing its nature. So it's a very, very complicated process that differs from riff to riff. I typically, when we start working, one of the first things we work on is the structure, the basic idea and structures. Then we decide how much weight in terms of orchestration we want to add on a specific part. Sometimes we started experimenting with extended techniques, aleatoric techniques, atonal stuff. More recently, from King going on, we started using more atonal stuff like percussions or even aleatoric effect that are taken on a mainstream side. They are taken from horror and thrillers, but let's say historically speaking, they're basically textures, techniques that were developed by late classical composers, like contemporary composers like Penderecki or Ligeti. So it's all sorts of stuff that end up being part of horror movie scores and stuff like that. So I started incorporating that as an element of tension or simple noisy colors and stuff like that. That's something that I don't hear often in, maybe nowadays it happens more, but back in the days, having orchestration, symphonic elements in metal music meaning, okay, let's put some string chords on top or string melodies or some choirs, or everything was, even when it was very well crafted, like if I think about power metal bands like Rhapsody or or even symphonics, it was pretty much 99% tonal and kind of melodic. So nowadays it's being different for us, but also for other bands, for other projects, I guess, because everybody now is more. Nowadays it's easier to get familiar with different techniques or with different soundscapes in general. So even technology, you can get a crazily good libraries for cheap price. So it's crazy what you can do with just a laptop.
Yeah, the means of entry is a lot easier these days. I remember like back in the day when I was just like, that's how I actually found out about Soundiron. I was working on a solo project and I was just like, I just want to get like a cool epic choir for this part, because like I was using a choir from another sample library back in the day, but I didn't really like it that much. But I was listening to some of the demos on the for Olympus choir on the website at the time, and I was just like, oh my god, like this is only $99, and I wanted to get the micro, but at the time it wasn't player, so I was like, well, I don't have the full version to contact. Well, all right, I'll get that, and like just completely replaced all my choirs because I was just like, all right, cool, like I'll use that one. Back then it was definitely not as easy to come by.
It's crazy how easy it is. Also resources, not just music resources that kind of Spotify, YouTube, whatever, but also tutorials. Like it's crazy how many things you can find nowadays that if I think about 15 years ago when I started being interested in this, it was so much more difficult to find practical examples of very complicated things that could be less complicated if you solve them in practice, like you can do today with your channel, for example. If I think about your channel, if I think about Alex Mukala channel, for example, which is I'm a big fan. I don't know if you know him, but he's so funny.
He does a lot of
he makes
cool videos.
All these very complicated concepts so easy for let's say even for a novice, for a beginner. But if I think of the number of things, even complicated things that I learned on YouTube in the past few years, compared to how much I was struggling before then, scrolling through forums or reading ebooks about orchestration, but it's not as actually having a score breakdown or a score analysis video. I didn't attend. I don't have a degree or any kind of diploma in music. I studied. I went to college, but I studied something different. So it's for me. I'm completely self-taught.
Awesome.
Except for a few piano lessons that I had when I was like a teenager. But for me, this new world that we have is priceless.
Yeah. And if people ever ask me like, oh, did you go to school or anything? I just tell them, nope, I went to YouTube University.
Yeah.
That's where I learned, dude. I learned so much stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, I studied like quite extensively in terms of orchestration, and before then, in terms of harmony,
mhm,
I've been reading a lot. Honestly, it's not like that I'm some kind of genius that can become proficient at something just watching a few YouTube videos, like many people can. But I had to study a lot. I had to practice a lot with in creativity, especially. I mean, being creative is something that you have to practice with a lot, and
mhm,
you have, besides theory, having a basic theoretical foundation in school. But I think that what you might miss in college, that many, even really great students, they might miss, it's not knowledge but imagination. Sometimes it's the lack of real creativity, besides composition exercises, besides writing a fugue following all the guidelines, all the counterpoint guidelines that you might memorize and might end up being completely formulaic and based on what everyone else was doing 400 years ago. It's uh, being really creative and develop your own language. That's something so difficult and that requires so much practice
mhm.
and trial error. Like,
Oh
I've
yeah.
written so much garbage since I started. So
Yeah, learning and applying, I think, is like, if because I know there's some people, and going to school is definitely great if that works for you, because some people need that discipline of like, okay, I'm going to go to this class, I'm going to sit there, I'm going to learn everything they're going to tell me, I'm
absolutely.
going to, but like, if you're one of those people that, have that more like autodidactic personality, and you get, really into whatever you're into, you'll find a way, and you'll figure out a way. And just like learning and applying, it's like you, or get inspired, you hear something, oh, I wonder how they did that, and then you just kind of like go on that exploration of trying to find it on your own. It's like when you're looking for new bands, and you're just like, you almost enjoy the search, just because it's like, and then when you find it, you're like, man, like you really appreciate it a lot more, because I mean, nowadays it's like so much music just getting thrown all over the place. It's almost hard to keep up. But it's like back in the day when stuff wasn't really as easy to find, especially with like music education, or, I remember I used to get like duplicated VHSs of like old guitar instructional videos and stuff from like Tony McAlpine and like Vinnie Moore and all these guys. And like I would just burn those things out just watching them all the time. But it wasn't easy to find back in the day. You had to kind of like, it's like the tape trading,
Remember the infamous first guitar method from Petrucci?
mm-hmm.
Well, what the
Rock Discipline.
yeah, I remember my guitar player at the time in my local band wasn't even, he was like, man, I'm struggling just getting past the first few minutes when he's warming up and showing the extension of his hand. It's crazy, it's or Michael Romeo.
Oh yeah.
I remember some friend of mine like downloading it from Emule or something like that, something like that, but very, very, otherwise it was impossible to get
Yeah.
completely in Italy. Even imagine, it's like, oh man, look at this video. It was very, very low resolution, and you had Michael Romeo fucking explaining, I don't know, Out of the Ashes or
Yeah. Like Sea of Lies solo, like the
Sea
little
of
tapping.
Lies. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff was, yeah, it was just like when you came across it, like that's how it was for me when I came across Resticuli, because like I just got a computer, and I was like getting into the guitar shred stuff. I was into like Ingve and stuff like that. And I just looked, like Googled shred guitar or whatever, and Resticuli popped up. And I was just like, oh my God. It was just like all the guys that I've seen, but like, even like, I mean, Michelangelo Badia was like the one of the other guys who I saw who
Mm.
was playing really quick, but he was like him even on more cocaine, not really doing cocaine, but you know what I mean? Like, just
You
like,
don't know. You don't know.
I
Maybe.
don't know,
Uh,
man. To
uh,
play some of that stuff is, and he was just doing these like wild stretches and playing so super fast and just doing all these crazy arpeggios and stuff. And I just like got some of his old CD-ROMs and just like nerded out on that for a long time. And yeah, it was a lot of fun just like stumbling across that stuff as a kid. But yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about it. Like, so like, how did you get into music, and how did you start kind of beginning that journey?
I've always liked music in general. I've always listened to a lot of music since I was a kid. I wanted to take piano lessons when I was 14 or 15. I don't remember. I asked my mom to start piano lessons because I had like a classmate at the time. He wanted to start a band and playing some. I was recently introduced to metal. I started listening to Metallica, Blind Guardian. I remember there were magazines with these compilations on CDs, and I started even listening to very obscure stuff like Lacrimosa. You know Lacrimosa, the band from Germany.
No, I
They
don't think
they
I've ever
have
heard them.
they were incorporating like real orchestras, and they play some like gothic stuff in German,
Mm-hmm.
very dark stuff, but beautiful. And also Rage, you know the band Rage.
No, I haven't heard them actually.
From Europe, yeah, like Metallica was my one of the first metal bands that I really got into. I've always been fascinated by orchestras and the piano like as an instrument. So I remember my mother was started asking around, and the first answer that we got from a very popular piano teacher at the time, and he was, kind of a famous guy. The first real answer that we got was, "Oh, but is he starting now? He's too old."
Yeah, right.
Really?
I
He's
didn't
like,
want to.
he's not 5
I
years
didn't
old.
want
He's
to
done.
become like. I didn't want to become Lang Lang or Polini. I just wanted to be like to play for fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, I had I already noticed that I had a decent ear, so I could figure out things on the piano by ear. But that was not enough for him. He just said, you will never do anything. You can't expect to do anything serious with music if you start now. So
Just shut you down right from the gate, like
yeah,
right from the get go.
from
Like,
the start.
you're not going to be
But-
great, kid. Sorry, I just want to break it to you. Yeah. Like, you jerk.
I was like, okay. So my first piano lesson, it was more a meeting than a lesson. Didn't go that well. But then we found another teacher. She was a very nice person. I started with her for a few months. Then I remember I had a bicycle accident, and I broke my pinky. So I had to stop for a few weeks, but I was young and stupid, so I didn't carry on the lessons after that.
Yeah.
So after 3 or 4 years, the infamous like band project that I had with my classmate, after a few years, that it was actually starting to happen in a way. We started, figuring out ways to, we wanted to do our own music, so it was very childish in a way, but we wanted to do that. Okay, I said let's make it happen. So I remember I asked for I don't remember, like a birthday gift, a very crappy. I had a very crappy. Was a GEM, like it was a very entry level.
Mm-hmm.
We've sampled some of those.
Very very entry level arranger keyboard for real beginners. So
Mhm.
it was a toy, basically, 61 keys. And I started practicing with that and with the upright piano that we had at home. It's like an old upright that my mom got. I started practicing there and having like then I joined a local band. So the very first band that I had in mind, it's actually something that never happened in the end. But I shortly after I joined a local band, where Paolo, the bass player from Fleshgod, was already playing.
Oh,
So
okay.
we've been playing together since I was 18.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, we started having our first shows, and we were playing. Basically, it was like Children of Bodom were becoming huge back then.
Mhm.
Like they were exploding.
Yeah.
So we were like, it was a mixture of classic metal, like Iron Maiden, Judas. We had even a couple of Judas Priest covers, but we blended it with more like heavier stuff,
Mhm.
and more like melodic death metal and stuff like that. And then I remember at some point Tommaso, the first singer for that. I mean, the first singer after Francesco who left in
Mhm.
2017 joined. So we basically, yeah, we had three guys from Fleshgod from this on this band at the
Mhm.
time. Then I started after a few years of playing. I was already at the time practicing a lot. I remember practicing because I wanted to kind of make up for the time I wasted doing silly things and not developing my ability in music. So I really remember like hours and hours of practice
Mhm.
to make up for it. So I started being decent, then good in a way for the local standards. And I also joined other bands. I started having experience with that. And I also, after that, I remember that I started also after a few years developing a big interest, like a very strong interest towards not just technique, like not just pure technique, but what was actually happening behind the music, behind the music that I loved. And I started being more and more interesting. But I've always been kind of interested in like movie scores. I've always loved movies, so I've always loved cinema music.
Yeah.
So I started, I remember that when I discovered, I think that the first biggest influences in terms of metal music was Dream Theater. So I remember that it was at that time that I started studying a lot more on a practical level, but also a few years later, I started developing this strong interest towards harmony, composition. I started studying classical harmony, classical counterpoint, and then trying to explore like beats of whatever. I did what pretty much in a way what Francesco did on drums. I was dealing with very complicated concepts that were behind the music that I loved. And at the same time, I was lacking some basics that I was slowly building as I progressed. So in the end, I ended up being what I am today. So I'm kind of, I have, I think, a good theoretical knowledge. I know I am an avid reader. Nowadays we have YouTube. So let's say I am very much into like very nerdy things also on YouTube about, harmony and theory and music production. But it's always very, how do you say that? Like erratic. It's always been very
like controlled chaos almost, like
controlled chaos. That's
I use that term. Yeah.
Basically, okay, I like this song, I like this track in particular, I like this, I love this symphony, I love this piano piece also. Okay, let's see what's behind that. Let's see so I started discovering things that I started practicing with things that I discovered the theory behind them just years later. That's the point. And then Fleshgod started in 2010, like as a permanent member, because Francesco, after having involved me in all in the production and the songwriting, he said, okay, but we need someone. If we really, really go crazy on the symphonic element, we also need someone to take care of it as a full-time member, not just for the, let's say, technical duties, or not just for songwriting. That's something that I could do with you even if you have a day job. But the problem is for me to have someone on stage when I play that people can see.
Like it's not just a backing track of all the stuff. It's like you're actually seeing someone on stage.
Even if you, of course, we have pre-recorded tracks, because better than me that it's even if you're a really good piano player, way better than me, there's no way to get the kind of realism even if you have the fanciest laptop and the fanciest hands live. Everything has to be carefully programmed and mixed. So I basically, what we started doing from the album Labyrinth and then going on is having me playing piano all the time. So I basically, sometimes I just double riffs, or I add like percussive layers, or just maybe laying down some chords, or maybe having some music box effects on top, finding ways to incorporate the piano everywhere. And to sneak it in a very dense mix, which is not an easy task. And that's what I do all the time now. But back then, even when we weren't doing that, not literally, I was doubling the orchestra with a string patch. That's what I did. But at least it's not for the quality of the sound or the quality of my playing. It's because in his vision, in Francesco's vision, and I think he was totally right, people had it's like Mustis for Demo. Even if they're playing Progenies of the Great Apocalypse, there's still him performing it on a keyboard with maybe a crappy string sound, but very low in the mix. But he's there. People knows he's in charge for that. He's responsible for that element in the music. And that's very important. Many bands are like, okay, we use backing tracks, but having an actual member, someone who, even other keyboard players or maybe just other musicians in general can identify with, or even just fans, just having, okay, I love this band because it has piano, strings, choirs. Who's doing that? him. Okay, he's the guy. He's the only bald guy in the band, being like playing random stuff on the piano, and just it's like that. It's an image, but it's an image thing, but it's also a philosophy thing in a way. So it's connected with the music.
Yeah, it's like tying all those elements together visually and having a person on stage performing those things.
I saw you did a 2020 live streaming show on YouTube. How did that go?
That was really good, and really, honestly, if I have to be honest, really emotional for us.
Yeah.
Because it's the only live shows that we performed. Okay, not the only one, because we actually toured. We actually one of the few bands that managed to tour in 2020.
Oh wow!
Which is it's weird because we actually toured in the UK before COVID spread. So then we went back home. We had another like a US tour planned with the string quintet. So a very fancy thing, very a beautiful thing that never happened, unfortunately, because everything went down the hill from then on. And so we basically needed to find ways to. We started. I remember that year we started, producing more content for to stay active online, to sell, also to sell merch online, which was our only way to kind of stay afloat. So I remember that everybody was doing those live streaming shows. Some of them were really fancy, or ended up being like with full production and everything. Some others were more intimate, but our band the music is strongly connected with our characters on stage, with the visuals, with the imagery and everything. So we're like, okay, man, we can't do something. I mean, it's very risky to go like to do something, and not just risky, but it feels so weird and so unnatural to be dressed like that with makeup, to have a stage lights and everything, and play like the evil dudes with all the costumes and the blood and the sweat in front of no one, because there's no audience. There's no possible audience for us. So it would feel so weird. And we don't have the means that other bands, I don't know if you're Craig for sure. I don't know if Nathan is familiar with bands like Behemoth or there are or Nightwish. I don't know, that they produced during the past 12 months or more, after the live streaming thing started being more popular. Bigger bands started to invest more in this kind of content product. So you can see amazing live streaming shows from Within Temptation, Nightwish, with like full virtual stages, or Powerwolf or Behemoth. They shot this crazy live show inside an abandoned cathedral.
Oh wow!
With pyros, with crazy like real-time edits and images and actors and dancers and anything you can imagine. So it's a very cool visual experience, but we didn't have the budget for something like that. So, and it was very risky. But also we didn't feel, the first thing that we thought was, okay, we can't do that. When we do like the angry Italian zombies playing classical music with face painting and everything, we are acting in front of a crowd who kind of yelling at us all the time.
Yeah.
So we
like
can kind of
energy and all
an
that.
exchange of energy for us, and you can do that. But we are not like that in real life. I mean, I'm here with the LED lights and the tablet, and I'm just a guy with Cubase, and I can't do that in front of no one, in front of a camera. That wouldn't be authentic.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to get pumped up for something when you don't have that crowd energy. It's definitely a whole nother thing when you have 500,000, 600,000, 10,000 people in front of you. It completely
even if
changes.
They are 50, but they're fully committed to what you're doing, it can be a really cool show.
Yeah,
you give that energy back. Or if you have a crazy full production, so it's basically like shooting a video clip, but that behind you there's, I don't know, some Hollywood trickery, and there's like a great cinematography, great effect, great lights, and a great show. Then of course, like we do in our music videos, we can perform something like that. We can try to be as energetic and powerful as possible, even on camera, but that's a different thing. It's so different. You know what the outcome is and how people will see that. But with our budget and with all the situation there, also imagine that at the time was really difficult it was summer, so it was, COVID kind of was all the restrictions and everything was more loose and more safer, but still. So we at some point I remember we planned to do something bigger in the fall, but then we realized, okay, the fall is going to be nasty again. Yeah. So let's avoid that completely because it's a big financial risk. So at the time everything was messed up. The risk was really high and we didn't really feel like doing a proper show with costumes and props in front of cameras. So we decided to do exactly the opposite. We have this really fancy, really, really cool studio near Rome where big pop acts actually, they record and perform there on a daily basis. We decided, okay, let's do something. Okay, let's not do the rehearsal room thing, which is not good. We don't want to do that, but do something in the middle. Let's do something which is cool to see, eye-catching, but on the other hand, more intimate. So showing, we felt also was more appropriate for the time. Okay, let's be naked, like more ourselves, like dressed as in casual clothes, performing. Just let the music speak. That's also one of the reasons why we decided to do that. And then we shot an acoustic version of an older song, The Day Will Be Gone, in the same environment. It's a completely different video if you compare it to all our other music videos, because we are just ourselves writing the song, recording, mixing, working in the studio and being together in the rehearsal. We wanted to give people another vision, another glimpse, what we are. And people just went crazy. Nobody complained about the lack of costumes, the lack of blood lights or whatever, or nobody. Like everybody was like, wow, they really did something different. I loved it. And everybody wanted to see after we streamed it. Everybody wanted to see that again. So we re-uploaded it for another weekend. And people still, sometimes I see comments around of people asking about the live show and when it's going to be released, because people, saw a different side of us.
Yeah.
Bunch of guys just doing what they love the most and not just acting in front of a crowd, but being more, naked.
Yeah, because it's not just about the aesthetics. It's like at the heart of everything. If you close your eyes, you hear all this amazing stuff going on. And the visuals should just be more of like an aid to that. But at the core of it, it's like a group of people getting together and just, putting it all out there.
I think it was a great chance for people to be focused more on the music, especially because, playing for live streaming is that you get all the details much better. We also had Eugene, who just joined the band, the new drummer. He had performed with us in UK. It was like a general rehearsal for us, but that was, let's say, the biggest show that he had in front of a bigger audience, because we had, I don't remember, like a couple of thousand viewers. So it was really good, considering that everybody was doing that and people was everybody was at home. So it was a great chance for them to, but many didn't. I remember at the time, many were skeptical. Many, especially metalheads, were like, I'm not, watching live streams because I miss that kind of energy. So I think that we missed many of them because they were, they had doubts, and that's I understand that, because it's a very different thing. But all things considered, it was good.
Yeah, it sounds like a great success.
I think there was a lot of bands who were, or not bands, but fans who were open to it because it's a means of supporting. And hey, you know what? I can't go see shows, but this is about as close as I can get right now. And not only are you helping support the bands, but it's like, well, I would love to go see them live, but if this is my only means right now, then hey,
people who want to support, they will always find out, and this is a good chance. I remember we also we produced specific T-shirts that's designed for that.
Mhm.
I remember that we sold many of those. We sold more merch than on an average headliner show
Mhm.
because people who attended loved it and wanted to support even more. So
Mhm.
they bought the Live at Bloom Studio T-shirts, and it was really, really cool. It was also for us very like a precious help.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And on the other hand, you had people saying, "Oh, this is the future, man. Get used to it. This is
Mhm.
what all we got for the next decade." And now all the bands are starting to do it, so it's the new formula. And of course, it didn't happen because as you know, as soon as live shows and venues started opening again, and restriction being lifted and everything, of course, live shows started like skyrocketing. Like in the US, I think there are 15 metal tours at the same time right now.
Yeah, it's probably just everyone's just like crossing paths. But I feel like especially now, I've been seeing a lot of shows where they're just selling out, like shows that maybe you didn't necessarily think would have usually sold out, maybe 3 or
Yeah.
4 years ago, just because I
Mhm.
think people are just so hungry to go out there and see live music
Absolutely,
again.
yeah.
And a lot of the bands are probably they've been without being on the road or just hustling and networking online and just like putting, as much stuff out there and working on new music. So it's like when everything just was like, all right, time to do it. And now we can, like people are just, that much more hungry to go out and see live music, which is
Absolutely.
awesome.
Have you seen Archspire?
Yeah, yeah, that was the tour I was thinking about. It was Archspire, as Entheos, and I think in
Mhm.
Fury,
Mhm.
and yeah, and I'll see Malcolm posting, oh, sold out show, or Naveen and Cheney, sold out show, and it's just like, wow, that's really awesome.
We were talking about Live Nation, and they said that ticket sales are up 20% from 2019. So it's fully rebounded and then some. So everyone and their mom are going to be at shows. Can you tell us about your live setup? You got like multiple keyboards, a laptop. What's going on there?
Actually, my live setup is it's very essential because, like I said, I mean, in terms of live show, we have basically we split our live rig in two separate units because we carefully weighted everything not to exceed the the typical aircraft
Flight
luggage
stuff.
limitations that you
Nice.
have.
Nice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's we everything is within like the two units. Each one of them is within 23 kilos, which is the standard, not to avoid overweight. Because if you have to pay overweight at that point, it's better to pay for an extra baggage. So it's because
Yeah.
it's pretty much the same cost.
Mhm.
So since we fly a lot, sometimes we fly every day for in Australia, for example, Australian tours, South American tours, Asian tours. You fly almost every day. So we have that, which is very basic. I mean, we have everything is running through. We have a MacBook Air which runs our backing tracks, stereo backing tracks. I split, like I have a main orchestral mix with, let's say, 90% of it. Then I have an extra track. I run Cubase AI because I don't need that many tracks, and now it's different. But when I started using it, it was the only one without the dongle. I just don't want to waste a USB.
Yeah. I hate
Yeah,
dongles.
yeah, I hate that. Also, where you're on tour, where you're on stage, it's risky because if it gets broken or lost, you're fucked. So
Yeah, one more thing to
basically,
break and go wrong. Yeah.
yeah. So Cubase AI, stereo backing track for the orchestra, another backing tracks for the extra vocals, then click tracks for everyone. Everyone, we ended up having, each one has had their own personalized click track with personalized accents, and so we have like 4 in total with
Oh, wow.
different scents. Then yeah, we run I don't know if you're familiar with Overloud TH2. It's a guitar plugin from an Italian company. It's very lightweight, so I ran 3 instances of it with the 2 guitars and the bass. So everything is running through our laptop. No campers, no axe effects, nothing that that could bring the overall weight over 23 kilos basically.
Mhm.
And it's also expensive. So not to mention that. So
Yeah.
it's dead, and everything is routed onto a Motu 828 expanded via ADAT with everything. Basically, we have more channel provided by a Focusrite preamp, Octopre. I don't know if you guys know it, with built-in compressors and stuff. So, and then we have a splitter, like a passive splitter, and a patch bay to make it simple. So basically, we everything is sent then to Sennheiser's in-ears, wireless monitoring systems. Everyone has, we have everyone have their own, and it's pretty much it. I mean, we have everything coming from there except for drums. Drums, if anyone needs it, we get a feed from the front of house. So and everything else is going through the rack. Then all the mics, the vocal mics are splitted. So one signal is routed outside through the patch bay. Then we have a big loom with all the outputs that are going. It's a big like snake going. It's a like 10-meter snake going to the front of house to the stage box. We have also the kick trigger also is going inside the rack for listening, and and it's pretty much all the for me. Me personally, I just have here in Europe, I have Roland FP30, which is a very basic, let's say, student digital piano. The reason why I use it is that we have a piano shell, like a wooden piano, real piano shell. It's basically a real upright piano, an old one, which has been emptied. We had someone taking out all the hammers, the ARP inside, which is the heaviest thing that you have inside the piano, the keyboard, everything. And we put the keyboard, the digital piano inside it.
Nice.
So
I've seen that. Yeah.
The illusion is, the first time I remember we had the first piano, we built it. And it was the old upright that my mother has in her living room. And that was the piano I was practicing with when I was younger. So we destroyed it. I mean, we emptied it. We had the piano inside, and my first digital piano was a Yamaha P90, and I still have a Yamaha P90 in the US, because it's pretty much, we use very basic digital pianos for the simple reason that they sound good. They have a weighted, a great action, which I like, great keyboard action. Weighted, like graded 88 keys, hammer action, a nice piano sound, which is everything I can ask for. I don't use sample libraries live. I just think it's not worth it. Our music is very dense, and I just have a few exposed piano parts. I don't think it's worth it. So I just use the built-in sounds, the keyboard sounds, very fast. Like you just trigger it and it's ready. So, and no technical issues whatsoever, unless someone pulls the plug. So
trips on a cable or something.
Yeah, sometimes it happens. So it happened. So it's last show we had one guy went on stage and walked on the power strip and everything. Like, well, so the whole rack. Yeah. It's
yeah. I think that's always been the thing that scares me about that idea. Like, I think, but like, well, the other band Archaic that I was in for a while, we were doing a lot of like more like cinematic sound stuff, and we wanted to have things trigger and like play more like on time, like with the actual tempos of the music. So we would have like a little, like an iPad, or not iPad, like an iPod with like, click and guitars on one side and then all the sounds on the other, and just like pan them until the front of the house guy. And that was like very basic, just trying to get into it. And like now it's like stuff is like way more intricate. And I think like Carl Sanders from Nile used to have like bring like a full on like computer on stage. Like some of like, it's a little bit like scary. Like when I think about that, I'm just like, man, like if that thing just crashes, like.
But if I have to be honest, since we've been doing this for years now, and yes, it's always risky in terms of, your computer can crash, and if it happens, you're stopping the show. But we had way more technical problems concerning amps, if you carry amps, I mean, if you go around, if you tour a lot, you might be, maybe you're not able to find the right amp, or maybe you find a crappy amp if you go to at a festival, or maybe on tour. You just have rentals, or you borrow them from other bands, and that especially when you carry them a lot, they can get broken easily. That it happened to us. We started with amps with heads and cabinets, like in 2011. We had like a full rig, like traditional rig for bass and the two guitars, but we had so many problems. And then we had so many monitor problems, because the monitor guy he can be your best friend, but very often he isn't. So you're like, okay, I remember this show we had, I don't remember it, in Richmond, Virginia. There's this club, I don't remember the name. I played there several times, and there was this old guy at the doing the monitors, and every time he was like smashing one or more elements on the stage monitors, like really pushing loud. Like I remember once it was the orchestra. It was so loud that wow, you couldn't hear drums on stage. It was just, and he couldn't. He wouldn't give a shit about anything you would tell him. Oh man, this is painful. Just give me some more bass and guitars, and he wouldn't listen. So because probably he couldn't listen because he was deaf. So it's we started by saying, okay, we want a standard. So the standard is here. It can be here. It can be with us all the time. So click tracks, we also have many, stops, like breaks within the song. So I can play the piano without having the drummer keeping the tempo, or we can have arpeggios and stuff with no drums at all. So
and you guys are all playing in time.
That's much more powerful. Or when you have to start over, you just start over. So it's so much more effective. Also, your monitors are always pretty much the same, because it's always, everything is in ear, and we have much more control. So in the end, you might experience some technical issues, but it's not much worse than using, going full analog all the time, because you can have problems in that way as well.
Yeah, someone drops a head, breaks a tube or something, or
it's and you don't have a standard. You can't play our stuff with different amps every night. It's crazy. So or different monitors, different balances. How can you do that? Everyone is way happier now. Even we know that we might miss the power of having amps on stage, providing some energy on your back, but we are getting used to this, and now we can't. We had a tour in South America 5 years ago, and I remember we had a connection in London, and they lost one of the two units, the one with the sound card and the Focusrite and the splitter and everything. So the other unit was just wireless, which were useless, and there was no way for us to perform. So I remember I borrowed a sound card, don't remember, like a PreSonus from Kerim, he's the drummer for Septic Flesh. We were touring with them. So I remember we had the drummer, who was the only one having the click, and everyone else was on, me included, we were on monitors, and that lasted 5 days, because that damned unit was impossible to track.
Wow.
I mean, we were in constant contact with the assistants of I don't remember, Iberia, or don't remember which island, and they were like, man, this flying case can't be found anywhere. We're like, wow. And the problem with South America is that every day you fly to a different location. So you can't, it's very difficult to get it delivered to the location that you won't be at the next day. So we managed in the end, because the problem was that the tag was basically ripped. The baggage had no tag anymore, so they couldn't find it. But we provided a description, and among all the lost items, it was the only flight case with that specific shape and specific weight. So they finally found it, and we had it delivered in 4 or 5 days, where we had horrible shows, but we had just monitors and hi-hats, but it's okay.
You got to pick your problems. Pick your problems, right? So, like, I know Craig has talked about making things more simplistic as he gets older. It's like it used to be like forum warriors, and you're arguing about which tube amp is the best for live, and then eventually you just like, I need efficiency. Like, I need everything to be efficient, and that's got to be a very fast setup. Like, to get on stage and start setting that up, it's got to be pretty quick.
Yeah, especially if changeover times are kind of short and tight, like it happens a lot. So
yeah, because you could basically have all that stuff turned on and basically boot it up and ready to go before you can just wheel it out on stage, and then just get everything else basically put in place, like making sure all the drums, everything's just plugged in. Seems like it would be
have you seen there are, like, now it's more and more popular having there's plenty of bands having their own mixer. They use, most of the time, 90% of the times, it's a Behringer X32, the rack version, which is, you can control it with your iPad. And I saw many bands doing that, even big bands, like having the sound engineer just connecting the left and right, going to the front of house, and then controlling everything from monitors to levels to EQ, everything through the iPad.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Many bands do that. Also, having everything, let's say, doing everything in the box with a laptop also allows you to do like volume automations for all the instruments involved. If you have an X32, for example, you can use a VST controller to automate even vocals and stuff like that. So you can have like silence, mutes when it's needed, no feedback, nothing. For example, Francesco, my singer, former drummer and now singer and guitarist, he is like, he has to sing and kind of interact with people. So sometimes he forgets to just put the volume knob down to avoid noises. So we managed to find, all the spots where he's not playing or just singing, or maybe at the end of the song, I just put the mute on his track, and he's like, he can't do any kind of crazy thing, and
just put his hands up, just like open up, like just like pick all the strings, and like you hear nothing.
Yeah, just like that. No, I mean it's very useful in that regard, for sure.
Yeah, especially when you have like live stuff going on, because sometimes you'll get like crazy feedback issues, or sound guys turning things up too loud and it starts bleeding into microphones, and it can get really, really messy really quick.
Yeah, we have great sound guys, especially now that we use this system. We figure out a way to make guitars thicker by basically splitting, having stereo guitars, but not using as a proper stereo, like with a proper stereo feed. Basically, we use two different signals. We send the main amp signal to two different cabinet simulator, which is kind of you get two slightly different sounds coming from two different outputs. So we have 4 guitars in total, like one for the left, 2 for the left guitar, and 2 for the right guitar. So
that's cool.
Layering them and putting them slightly out of phase, it gives you more, let's say, beef and a cooler sound. Which kind of
thickens it up.
Yeah, kind of makes up for the fact that you're using a digital simulation, which is not even a top-notch simulation. It's a good simulation, but it's kind of lightweight.
Yeah, it's crazy, because I remember back in the day, I mean, people probably still do this now, but like they would have like 2 different cabs on stage, and they would have this like some kind of device that sort of puts them off slightly. Yeah, it was like some kind of like it you're hearing both of them at the same time, but it would kind of give them a little bit of a delay. So it has that little bit of that sort of not quite at the same, hearing it all at the same time. But yeah, it's just crazy how it's like so much stuff is way easier now. Like I haven't played a show in like almost 9 years, since like 2013. And, and back then it was like, 6505, 12 space rack with a bunch of stuff, 412, and just like, going back to what you're saying about the Tetris game, like we had like a little like 4x6 trailer. So we had to really play the Tetris game. And if one thing was off, take everything out. Like, oh, how come this one thing doesn't fit now? It's like, oh, you messed up. You didn't follow the steps,
Yeah,
And it's like,
to be very, very meticulous.
yeah, but it's like nowadays, like so much stuff is way easier now. It's like you just, as long as you're understanding the technology and how to make it happen, like it's really, it's never been easier to like travel so lightweight. That's really cool. Thanks for breaking all that down.
Could you tell us about a personal project you're excited about that's outside of the band?
I've been, lucky enough to be involved in several projects with several bands, which are in many cases way bigger than my main band. So I think that has been really rewarding for me, and really it's also a way to kind of incorporate creativity and channel that in different ways with different styles. It's still metal. I think the most diverse band that I worked with. I mean, compared to what I do with Fleshgod is probably Ice Nine Kills. They're more towards that they're heavy, but they are like influenced also by rock music. They're basically a metalcore band with many different influences. They're really doing any kind of crazy things all the time. Like they go from the most like brutal or technical, even with kind of reminiscent of death metal in many ways, or deathcore, to more like rock oriented or punk oriented things. So they're really diverse, and I really enjoyed working with them because they have this horror. Let's say that the main thematic element for the band is the inspiration that comes from horror movies, games, books, and any kind of horror source or thrillers. And so their music is very cinematic and I find it very inspirational in many ways. Also because they always ask me, they keep asking me for so many different atmospheres and soundscapes. From song to song, you go from traditional orchestration or like old school orchestration, because maybe they have a song about Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. So any kind of Bernard Herrmann-esque string arrangements, or maybe on some other songs you have a completely different source. So I don't know, Stephen King novel, or Silence of the Lambs, or American Psycho. So they want completely different soundscapes, a complete different palette of sounds. It's not just okay, or orchestrating using the orchestra in different ways or in different styles. It's having a completely different palette for each song, and they have very clear ideas. They say, okay, maybe here, okay, we have this American Psycho song. I want you to go like full 80s on this part. Like they have a full break with which sounds like a rock song from like pop rock song from the 80s. I mean, many different. There's another song where they said, okay, can you do like a kind of a, in contrast with the song, which is very brutal, we want like a Disney-esque orchestral break here. Or it does okay, can you put some monster movies like from the 30s kind of arrangement here, or atmosphere on the intro, or stuff like that. So It's very diverse, and it's stuff that I don't have the chance to do, because if I work with a band, they might want something. We want something like Fleshgod style, so more like cinematic, traditional, bombastic orchestral music, or maybe dark, like cinematic music. Or I have this heavy, like a super heavy riff. So I love something like very like action movie, like some kind of action movie cue on top of this, stuff like that, or very dark, very gothic. So it's cool to have a band which is kind of asking you to step out from your comfort zones very often. So I experimented a lot with them, and sometimes I spend so much time on a small fragment or a small intro, small, interlude, just because it was something so diverse from what I usually do that I had to study, literally study how to do that, how to achieve that kind of sound. Or maybe I spend like hours or days just selecting the sounds that I would use on that specific song. Maybe even sampling sounds from the source, like, okay, there's the Evil Dead song. Okay, let's sample some screams or some stuff, and let's distort it or let's mangle it in order to make them even unrecognizable, but still having something,
those
which
elements,
is some thematic elements which are strongly directly connected with the source material. So I remember like there's this Pet Cemetery song from the novel, and then the movie series that are like, there's an old movie series, and then the remake, the reboot of Pet Cemetery. And I remember, since there's all this kind of Native American thing behind it, so there was this breakdown, and this is something that they kept. When I work with metal bands, with most metal bands, they want a traditional approach, but with them, and I can experiment a lot. So, for example, there was this breakdown. So all I did on the breakdown was putting, I found like a Native American chant, like an old guy singing. It's just the atmosphere that it creates on the song. So that this heavy breakdown, I didn't know what to put on top of it. I was about to leave it like kind of blank. Okay, just guitar driven riff, and that's it. Maybe some risers, some tension builders here and there, and that's it. And then I came out with, okay, let's put something weird. I came out with this like Indian chant idea, like a Cherokee chant, like a traditional prayer. I put it on top. I played a little bit with a little bit of like, I gated it. I remember I gated it with the chopper.
Oh, okay.
Mangling it, distorting it with like some huge like delays and reverb, and then putting this chopper. So at first, and autopan, so in a way that it starts like a floating voice. So it's floating around on the breakdown, and then it starts breaking with the chopper is basically applying like this filter, and you can sync it, and you can have like a saw wave or sine wave. You can apply any kind of filter to it. So it started chopping the voice, so it becomes really weird and kind of alien like, and it starts floating even faster. So this simple idea, which is nothing special, just it's on the record. I mean, when I work with them, many things that they come up with, they get either maybe they're kind of low in the mix because they're more, they are guitar driven bands, so they sometimes they don't like to keep like orchestrations or keyboards that high in the mix. But then when they like something, I really know that because it will be really present in the mix. And this is one of all the things they kept really loud. So just to give you an example of this, or I remember there's another song based off Cabin Fever. You remember Cabin Fever, the movie? So where everyone was having this weird virus which would cause rash, and you start scratching yourself to death. So for that, this is way beyond traditional orchestration or symphonic stuff. It's okay, I have to do something. It starts with a kind of a piano guitar kind of intro. So I with a guitar lead, but no rhythmic elements except for some drum accents. So I had this idea of having a sample of someone scratching his skin. I worked on the sound. I added effects, and I played a little bit with the pitch, and I created a loop with that. So the song starts with something that sounds like a shaker now, because there's autopan and I basically, with the pitch shift, I created a rhythm out of it. It sounds like a shaker, but it's not. It's actually someone scratching their skin, but putting them in a musical context. So just to give you an idea of how creative you can be working with a band like this, way beyond traditional stuff that you do. But I think that it's more like being a movie. I'm not a movie or TV composer, but it's pretty much like being something like working pretty much like in the same way with them. So I'm pretty happy But also many other metal bands I really enjoyed working with are Amorphis. Amorphis are really, they produce great music. I love them and I love working with them. And they really go, sometimes they really ask me to go kind of crazy with the orchestra when some specific sections. They're not a symphonic band, but they like to incorporate symphonic elements. I liked working with Angra, which are Brazilian progressive metal band, which I worked on the orchestration for a few years back. And Shadow of Intent, also one of, they're basically, we're friends. We toured together, and Craig, for sure, he knows them.
Yeah, I actually just heard about. I was checking out some stuff. I saw they were posting some like studio vlogs of them like working on some stuff. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know. Yeah, because they definitely have a lot of symphonic elements, especially in like the newer stuff.
Yeah, it's cool to, like I said, maybe with bands like them, it's more like, okay, I'm doing what I do for Fleshgod in a slightly different way, but it's pretty much the same kind of things. With Fleshgod, we don't use modern sound design elements because it will be weird. We have this kind of decadent, old-fashioned image, and I can't use like modern scoring techniques like or sounds like I don't know, Brahms or stuff
Brahms
like that, or
and like huge trailer impacts and stuff.
Synthetic risers and stuff like that I may be using for other bands, which can incorporate more modern elements like synths and stuff like that. That's what I like about exploring the sound palette. When I start working on something, I spend maybe 2 or 3 days or even more just selecting the sounds that I will be using. The more important and exciting the project is, the more I will spend on this thing. It's more relaxing. You can do it without overthinking is this part going to work? They wrote it, I just have to make it sound better. That's it.
It's like producing what they got the idea, just needs a little bit of love and attention.
It's surprising. Sometimes even unknown band, they come out they came out with really cool ideas on their own. All I have to do is adding some doublings, some extra elements, but not that much, because they're like everything is sound, everything works. So some other times they just ask me, okay, we have this line, just use them as a starting point, as a blueprint. And that's really useful in any way, even if they're kind of basic, because I know where they want the orchestra to be more present or prominent, to take over all the rest. They want more epicness, or maybe they have a melodic idea in mind, which is cool, and I just keep it as it is, and then I carve everything around it. So it really depends. There, from every single case is a different scenario.
Totally, man. Well, I've just got a few quick questions for you, and then we can wrap this up. You've been super generous with your time. The first one,
pleasure.
The first one I've got for you is, what is one of your favorite YouTube channels at the moment?
At the moment, my YouTube feed is filled with fitness, bodybuilding stuff, so it's kind of embarrassing.
No, that's great, man. Mine looks similar.
I mean, it's I think one of the first channel I really started digging into a few years back was Rick Beato's channel. You probably know him. He's really great. In general, what I follow, I love my passions. My two main passions beside music are fitness, but also movies. So, but I don't follow many cinema channels. If I have to be honest, most of the time I spend my time on YouTube, watching in tutorials or instructional videos, or even breakdowns, musical theory breakdowns, or song breakdowns, or arrangement breakdowns, orchestration breakdowns. So on the technical side, I would say, besides Soundiron, of course, the Soundiron channel, which I find really, sometimes I really spend some of my free time watching Craig showing how what I like about your channel is that you don't just scroll through the preset of a new library, but you're you're showing it in context. That's what you guys do, and that's what I love, because
thank you.
that's what's missing on many. Besides the demo, which you don't exactly know what's behind the specific demo. Maybe it sounds gorgeous, but then when you get a library and then you start using it in your own music, or in practice, it's not what you search for. Then that's why I like your approach.
Oh, thank you.
I find a great channel that I love. I find it very inspirational, and I also love the way it's presented, the content, the idea behind it is 12 tone. I don't know if if you guys know it.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
I'm a huge fan of that guy. I don't remember his name, but I think he's a pure genius. I mean, what he does with the fact that he's drawing on the sheet and he's explaining incredibly complex things, but the way he explains it, the way he breaks down the deepest, most advanced musical theories and concepts, with just explaining them with small elephants, just hand drawn in real time. I think it's one of the most glorious, beautiful ideas I've ever seen on a YouTube channel. I mean, it's for educational purposes. It's really cool.
We're gonna have to start doing that, Craig.
Yeah, I gotta bust out my my Procreate on my iPad. Like,
yeah, another YouTube. Just to wrap this up, it's another channel that just came. Just thinking about is the Corridor Crew channel.
Oh yeah.
The VFX artists react to, and that's really funny and really interesting to watch.
The stuntmen too are really good.
Yeah, but I've always been, you remember that VHS series that was like 30 years or 25 years back. It was like a series showing you how special effects are made in movies. I don't remember.
Oh, Movie Magic.
Movie Magic, yes.
Yeah, I used to watch that on Discovery when I was a kid.
Yeah, in Italy, back then you couldn't have it broadcasted, but there was this. They were selling the episodes on for each month a new episode will come out on VHS and you could buy it.
That's cool.
So yeah, it was. I had all of them, and
Nice.
it was way before the digital effects came out. So everything was practical, and I love that how the Corridor Crew guys they sometimes they break down even old movies with all the practical animatronics, and I really love it. It's crazy.
Yeah, I remember seeing all this stuff with like Rick Baker and him showing how he was doing stuff for like American Werewolf, and
Rick Baker is he still alive?
Yeah, he's still just as badass as ever. He's still like he's like a really good artist, painter, special effects. Like, yeah, dude is just he's a whole other beast.
You remember that? I don't remember the English title for it. That movie with Sigourney Weaver being a scientist studying gorillas.
I know what you're talking about.
But that movie, basically, all the gorillas that you see are just people in suits, and those suits were made by Rick Baker. So, I mean, not all of them, but at least half of them. The ones that interact with actors, at least. So I remember watching on Movie Magic. There was an episode about that movie, and real gorillas couldn't really. I mean, they weren't showing any kind of different behavior when the guys with because the suits were so realistic that I'm not sure gorillas couldn't tell, but they were kind of cool with them. So it's crazy.
Gorillas in the Mist is what it's called.
Yeah, Gorillas in the Mist. Yeah, it's the same title we have in Italy.
Nice. All right, the next question is best recent purchase under $100.
Recently, Oceania on a flash sale. Performance Samples Oceania on a flash sale. It's been priceless. I mean, it's really gorgeous. I mean, it's so easy to use that. I started using all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool library.
Very nice. All right, my last question for you is, what goals do you have for the next couple of years? What's next for you?
Winning an Oscar, maybe.
Oh,
No,
okay.
that's
All
too
right,
much.
all right, going
That's
big.
too much. That's
I
too
like
much.
it. I like it.
Shoot for the stars,
That's
my
too
man.
much. The goal, I think that getting finally back on the road for, and I mean, not all the time, but at least with a perspective on that, without any more hiccups, viruses, or wars. It's a pretty complicated situation, but I think that I hope we'll be back on track and kind of doing our thing, and way better than before. Now that we have I think that COVID was kind of instructional in a way. He showed us that if you really care about something, you don't want to lose it. And working with music, it's not like, or being with creativity in general, is not like any other job. So it might be extremely stressful or disappointing at times, or frustrating even, when you think about continuity or career, or you look at, maybe sometimes you look at other people more successful than you. That's very, very common. But in general, I wouldn't trade it for any other job. So it's my goal is to keep doing making music, which is something that you can't take for granted. I think I will keep studying and be curious. That's what until I'm 80, or I'm until I'm on the deathbed. I think I will still, I hope to be curious as I am today. So
it's got to be like the Dos Equis guy. Just stay thirsty, my friends. Yeah. Well, this is awesome, man. I really, really appreciate you coming on, and it's great to finally sit and hang out and talk to you.
I had so much fun, and it was, very nice to finally meet you in the flesh, in a way.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we get to meet at Hellfest. That'll be awesome.
So, when are you playing? Which day?
We're playing on Friday, I think. Francesco, it was a pleasure. I want to thank you so much for being on and chatting with us, and letting us know all the things that are going on with you, man. So definitely looking forward to seeing you at Hellfest and seeing everything that you got coming out in the future. And yeah, man, just keep doing it.
I'll see you at Hellfest, and hopefully soon in the US.
Yeah. If you guys are coming out here, man, I'd love to come see you guys.
Bye.
All right. See ya.
Take it easy.